They call him the greatest chess player of all time. From super brains to supercomputers, he's taken them on. And won. But now this Russian is locked in a different kind of struggle.
This regime is criminal, is a police state.
I've come to Abu Dhabi to meet him.
Hey, yes. How are you?
Gary Kasparov. He'll tell us about his legendary clashes with Anatoly Karpov.
Any match of that caliber is a personal rivalry, period.
And a few less legendary clashes since then.
What was it like in a Russian prison?
Gary will reveal a tragic family history of ethnic cleansing.
Being forced to leave the city where you were born and raised was quite tragic.
And share his views on Russian President Vladimir Putin.
It's very clear that Putin's rule will not be stopped by the ballot.
It's the ultimate battle of tactics, strategy, and wits.
In the beginning, if you lost, you had a finger cut off or you were killed.
A 1,500-year-old game of such mind-boggling complexity that men have gone insane playing it.
Mathematically speaking, there are as many possible chess games as atoms in the visible universe.
And from his birth in Azerbaijan in 1963, chess was the game for Gary Kasparov.
How old were you when you first played chess?
Probably before I turned 6, just watching my parents. According to the official legend that's told by my mother, and probably that was, true, I was watching them trying to solve the problem from a newspaper column. And I learned how to play without being told how to move the pieces. I knew it was a game designed for me. So, okay, we're always very, self-confident. So I loved it. I loved it, not just to play, but also to study the game. So I spent time even on my own. And actually, my mother limited my my enthusiasm because I just went to the chess training session only once a week when I was 7 or 8. On Sunday, so just because it was quite far away from our home.
You lost your father when you were very young.
Yeah, I was 7.
Yeah.
So 7. So and he was just 39. Died from leukemia. So and it was really a big shock. I mean, it was such a lovely couple, my mother and my father, and since he's gone, she spent her entire life working for me. So and just for my success. So and that's. I couldn't be more grateful for my mother. She turned 76. She's still full of energy, and the energy is just concentrated on helping me in my numerous endeavors.
That those endeavors revolved around chess was fortuitous. For a young player, there was no better place to be than the Soviet Union.
Why was chess established by then as the national sport, almost?
No doubt Russia had quite strong chess traditions going back to the mid-19th century. Don't forget, Russia included Baltics at that time and Poland. And many great players actually came from that region. Yes, especially Jewish players, yes. But in general, there was a strong foundation.
More than just a tradition, chess was actively promoted by the Soviet Union's revolutionary leaders. In a country obsessed with excellence, especially when it came to competing against the West, the game was a means of demonstrating not just sporting, but also intellectual superiority.
The world champion in the Soviet Union was not just a champion or the champion of any given sport discipline. It was a public figure. Seen by many as the sort of the role model. And there were very few options for kids to succeed. So that's why parents, if they wanted their kid to become special, chess was a natural choice for many parents to make.
Gary astonished his tutors with his natural aptitude for the game, taking the all-Soviet junior chess title in 1976. He was just 13.
When did you realize that you weren't going to be just a good chess player, but you were going to be special?
Look, I would look for some, milestones in my career. So I think the first one is just, we go back, it was age 14, when I knew I would be a real contender for the World Championship title. So right. Age 14 was a crucial point. I knew I was very good, even special before, but at 14, when I made my master norm, and it's not just playing better, but just you feel that you have so much energy and you can move on with your career.
In 1980, Gary became world junior champion and an international grandmaster. He was now 17.
Looking back, perhaps knowing then or learning later, what was the most important quality, is the most important quality of being a chess grandmaster?
Now, you have to start with the talent. If you want to be a really, really special player, you have to start with the talent. And then it's also your ability to work, because I believe it's also talent. An ability to work hard is a special talent many talented people do not have.
Funny that you say that. When I was interviewing Bobby Fischer during the 6 months he was in the public eye, it was about all he was after that. And Ed Edmondson of the Chess Federation in America and so on was saying, the great thing about Bobby, saying to Bobby, the great thing about it is his will to win. That's why he says. And Bobby Fischer shook his head and said, I've played a lot of chess players who've got wonderful will to win, but they were no good. Exactly as you say, the talent first.
Talent first, but also, it's about working, it's about excelling, it's about learning from your own mistakes, and actually being very open with yourself, even relentless, to recognize that you made a mistake. Because many great players, they try to sort of avoid digging up and finding out that they were not perfect. So this permanent challenge to find out what you did wrong and to improve. That's for me, it's a key of success, of going from being very good to very special.
How important is instinct?
I think that instinct, you may call intuition, it's a highly undervalued element of success. Intuition is something that you cannot actually touch. It's just gut feelings, and you feel it's the right things to do. You may be wrong, but treat intuition as a muscle. If you don't train your muscles, you cannot get stronger. If you don't trust your intuition, you will never become a good decision maker.
And in terms of when a game's in progress, how far ahead can you gaze into the future?
10, 12, even 15 moves for a top player is doable, but the natural range of the operation for a professional player, I may recall my own practice, would be 4 to 5 moves. Because in most of the positions, I have one option, and then my opponent can have 3 other options, and then I have so it's a geometrical progression.
In 1984, Gary finally got his chance at the biggest prize of all, the World Championship. But to win it, he'd have to beat the greatest chess player of the time.
Anatoly Karpov, son of a worker from the Urals, learns chess at the age of 4, master at 15, crowned world champion in 1975, national hero in the Soviet Union.
Was there the most personal rivalry in that contest to most of them? I mean, did you and Karpov really not get on, really?
Look, any match of that caliber is a personal rivalry, period.
Yes.
And naturally, this kind of rivalry creates a lot of tension, and it added to the mutual frustration, and
Yeah.
I guess it was all more than natural. Karpov is very solid positional, quiet player, just looking for small gains, and it's quite unique style. So I'm totally the opposite. So as you may call it, fire versus ice. So the main characteristics, created this unique competitive field.
And in fact, there was a sense in which people around the world sort of pictured Karpov as the regular communist and you as the sort of somehow voice of independent freedom or whatever. It became a bit political in that sense.
Anatoly Karpov received enormous support from the state and became some sort of the savior of the intellectual pride of the Soviet Union. He followed the rigid discipline of the party rules, while I was some sort of a rebel. So I believe that there are certain rules that I have to obey, but in the big picture, I didn't believe in following these rigid regulations. I was not shy of giving interviews to the Western press, again, at a time when it was quite questionable.
Yes.
I mean, not as dangerous as in Stalin's or Brezhnev's time, but it still, was not welcomed by Soviet authorities.
1984's championship was a brutal confrontation. Both players locked in a struggle of unbelievable complexity. The winner, the first to 6 victories. 30 years later, Gary still recalls every game.
This is not a game starting, but this is a game after 20 moves or something.
Yeah, actually, it's in our matches with Karpov, that was almost a starting position, because we had a theoretical duel. So that's one. Actually, Karpov played black always. This position, I played white. We spent time with our, teams, preparing and just, trying to exhaust all the options. And it for a long time, was a very important theoretical position. Actually, I think the modern evaluation tells that black is fine, but I succeeded in actually winning quite a few important games against Karpov. Actually, I never lost this position with white pieces.
For 5 months now, Anatoly Karpov and Garry Kasparov have been locked in mortal intellectual combat for the title of world chess champion. The psychological pressure is said to be appalling.
The score was 5-3 when the International Chess Federation intervened and called a halt. Karpov had apparently cracked. There were reports of a nervous breakdown.
The president of the Chess Federation said that the match should be stopped because it was damaging to your health. Not just your health, his health as well.
Okay,
but
it
that's
was damaging.
You think that's nonsense, yeah?
From my perspective, it was absolute nonsense, And amazingly, Karpov, who was technically leading at that point, 5-3, he obeyed. Actually, no, he agreed with the decision. At the press conference, when the decision was announced to close the match, I stood up opposing it, which was quite unheard. It was just February 1985, even before Gorbachev took over, so from Chernenko.
In late 1985, there was a rematch. This time, there was no escape for Karpov. Garry Kasparov had finally arrived. For 21 years, Gary would remain the greatest chess player in the world. The longest ever period of any player ever.
Some people would say, well, what do you do next? You've done that.
It's up to us what we want to do with our success. Because, eventually, if we are successful, we just have to make a conscious decision what's next. And for me, there was always a next station, because it was not enough for me just to win. I always wanted to make the difference.
Gary set about making that difference, launching an offensive against chess's ruling federation, FIDE, for what he regarded as the travesty of the previous year's World Championship.
They don't want to lose the power. Power means money, money means influence. I am defending the chess against this international chess mafia.
We saw not just inconsistencies in FIDE politics, but also its inability to capture the attention of the corporate sponsor. I was probably trying to impose very dramatic set of actions, the way I play chess, instead of trying to come up with the comprehensive long-term planning.
Eventually, Gary and British player Nigel Short formed their own breakaway chess federation, the Professional Chess Association.
Business is business, and on this question we're totally together.
For over a decade, FIDE and the new organization fought. The ultimate loser? The game of chess itself.
Now I think, you know, just it was probably, you know, too much for me to carry on, because, you know, just to become the best in the world by age 22, it's just puts enormous psychological pressure.
The pressure mounted. Gary was the reigning champion, but Anatoly Karpov just wouldn't lay down and die.
We started in 84, we played 84, 85, endless match, you know, unlimited match. Then we played 85, rematch, 86, another rematch, 87, another match, and then in 1990. So 5 matches, and just, you know, the finishing Karpov off as my, you know, nemesis, a historic opponent. So I think it was a certain moment when I just realized it was the end of the certain part of my life.
As one part ended, another began.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
By the time Gary finally finished off the Communist Party's favorite player, it wasn't only Karpov who was in trouble.
An era of great change. Change for the good, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. And when Reagan said his historic phrase, tear down this wall, in 1987, very few people could believe they would see it with their own eyes. So actually I was one of them, and I sensed that the Soviet system wouldn't survive in its, you know, rigid form. And 89, the collapse of Berlin Wall, I believe it was just, you know, it was not just liberation of Eastern Europe. I think it was just, you know, the end of this utopia, very dangerous utopia that threatened the entire world.
But the New World brought instability as the republics of the Soviet Union began to fragment. The results were to affect Gary profoundly. One of the first was Azerbaijan and his hometown, Baku.
If you look at the map of the old Soviet Union, there were many places where clashes, ethnic clashes, you know, they changed the political landscape. And Baku was one of the most tragic because of the numbers, and also, I mean, personally for me, I grew up there. I'm half Armenian, half Jewish, and there's many Armenian relatives.
In January 1990, ethnic and religious tensions, long held in check by central authority in Moscow, erupted onto the streets.
A crowd of some 50,000 people who were leaving from a demonstration at the Lenin Square committed pogroms, destruction, arson, violence, and murders.
The country's majority Azeri population formed lynch mobs and hunted down their Armenian former compatriots.
Мужчин топтали вот ногами. Сапогами на горло давили сапогами.
After 8 days of appalling violence, Soviet authorities intervened. But instead of stopping the killing, their arrival only accelerated the process.
These ethnic clashes and pogroms sort of offered an excuse for central authorities from Moscow to use military force and to establish some sort of the KGB military rule in these hotspots. It didn't save the empire, which was about to crumble, but it cost thousands of lives and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, considering the entire, you know, perimeter of the Soviet Union, millions of people who suffered.
Within a fortnight, nearly 200,000 ethnic Armenians had fled their homeland, never to return.
We all left Baku and never came back. So we just leaving by forcefully leaving the or being forced to leave the city where you were born and raised and grew up. I mean, that's spent first 27 years of your life.
Yes.
It was quite challenging. But I was 27. My mother was 52, and my grandmother, she was 78. So that's for her, it was quite tragic. The psychological trauma was very, very strong. And thinking about hundreds of thousands of others who have been evicted from their houses, who lost everything they collected over their lives. I mean, this thought is still painful.
About this time, 1990, I think, you made a decision to leave the Communist Party.
After this tragedy, and I saw it, and I left my native town, I decided that there was no good reason for me to stay within the party, because we, as every professional player, I had no choice but just to join it, to be part of this playing elite. But I always felt that I was able, by using my membership, to criticize what I believe was wrong. So very often I just reached the limits. Sometimes maybe I overreached my limits, but the world title helped me to actually stay afloat. But after Baku, I just sensed it was totally useless, and I lost any hopes that within the Communist Party there could be any positive change. And January 1990, more than 18 months before the August coup and the collapse of the Communist Party, I quit.
Did you feel that you could really take from that position at the beginning of 1990 and really have a dynamic political effect?
When I left Baku, I was just about to turn 27, so just quite young by any standards. But on the other hand, I was already world champion for almost 5 years. And I believe that by doing nothing, by pretending that this battle, this fight, didn't touch me, I would do disservice for the citizens of my country. Not that I expected myself to just create a coup by standing and just making a statement, but for me, from 1990 to nowadays, being part of this fight for human rights and for political decency in the Soviet Union, now in Russia, it's like a moral duty.
What happened next was to test Gary's moral duty to its limit. We'll discover how in part 2, when we'll also learn his thoughts on computer chess.
Deep Blue was, once I called it a $10 million alarm clock.
Russian politics today.
I don't think anybody could predict the return of the KGB to power.
And Moscow's most infamous punk rockers.
I always said that if they danced naked, but singing, God Save Putin, they would be probably awarded.
Why was chess...
I'm in Abu Dhabi with chess legend Garry Kasparov. The most famous player in the history of the game is on a global mission to promote it in schools.
Hello there.
And I've been invited along.
This time I'm going to beat this guy by doing this!
For these young chaps that are here, why is their life going to be enriched by playing chess?
The experience that we have been collecting from all over the world clearly shows that classes with chess are doing better in general curriculum than classes without chess. Yes.
I play chess because I find it really refreshing sport. I play chess and then I go study, and it helps me concentrate.
I made my move. I think I learned how to think the future from this, because if I move the wrong piece from chess, the opponent will kill me.
How do you learn to play chess?
I didn't have a chess set at home, so I joined the chess club.
You have a computer, I'm sure.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you can have a program on iPad.
Yeah.
Don't tell me you don't have an iPad.
I do.
I'm sure you do.
Today's computer chess is a long way from the early gaming machines.
Fascinated by this infinite chessboard, man has always wanted to solve its riddle. The great automaton of the 18th century gave the illusion that he had succeeded, but it was only an illusion. There was always a brilliant midget hidden in the machine.
In the 1980s, the race was on to design a computer powerful enough to mimic a human being, a machine that could actually think. Was it even remotely possible?
The stakes are high. In one corner, the world's greatest chess player, 34-year-old Garry Kasparov. In the other, the world's greatest chess-playing computer, a machine called Deep Blue.
According to this documentary, 1996's man versus machine competition did not go as planned for Garry.
Call it a blow against humanity. After 6 games over 9 days, Deep Blue, the IBM computer, beat Garry Kasparov, considered to be the best chess player in the history of the game.
And whoa! Deep Blue, Kasparov!
And allegations were raised that computer giant IBM did not play fair.
I still believe that yesterday the game was started by all computer specialists because I think something truly unbelievable happened.
Was that a memorable experience? I mean, you had a pretty good batting average against the computer, didn't you?
It's just people just tend to forget that it was a rematch. Actually, it's said, which means I won the first one.
Yes. Well said.
It's irony is that in the public mind, sort of closed the chapter of man versus machine. And many people thought it was the beginning of the triumph of artificial intelligence. Deep Blue was, once I called it a $10 million alarm clock. So it was just calculating, which again was enough to play at the highest level, but it was not a step towards artificial intelligence because it was based exclusively on the brute force of calculation. Actually, if somebody is interested, it's a position where I resigned. It's quite amazing that both myself and machine actually missed that black had a very unusual way of saving the game. So,
really? So neither you nor the computer.
Yeah, I just it's amazing because I thought it was it, and because it's interesting. I just trusted the machine. I also broke one of the important rules. It's never late to resign.
Yes, absolutely. And then soon you come face to face with Viktor Kramnik. Was that different to the other exchanges, or was it? Well, it's different to playing a computer, obviously.
No, Vladimir Kramnik was 12 years younger than I was. And irony is that, at one point he was my student in our joint school with Mikhail Botvinnik, but later, he also worked with me at my match with Vishy Anand in 1995.
This has been a very different World Chess Championship. As ever, the players were Russian, but they played in London, were visible live only on the internet, and the commentary was in French. Most dramatically of all, the great Garry Kasparov lost both his cool and his title. In game 13, needing desperately to win, he suddenly offered a draw.
Was he an outstanding opponent?
I was 37, I was still playing pretty good chess, but in this match, he was superior in the way he prepared. So I have to admit that I was probably too
complacent?
Complacent is the wrong word, probably. I'm just
confident?
Maybe overconfident, but actually it's I believed in my own invincibility.
Question for Garry Kasparov. What is wrong with you?
The match was actually quite helpful because it sort of shook off my brains. But I lost the title, which again probably had to happen one day. I kept it for 15 years, and for me it was important that after losing the match, I could come back. The fact is, after we played this match, so I kept on winning top tournaments, and actually I never lost another game to Vladimir Kramnik, so in classical chess. I kept my #1 rating for 5 more years. So I learned that, it's never late to learn. So that's why, you know, it's, even at age 37, you can learn from younger generation. And that was a very important lesson, not only for the remaining 5 years of my chess career, but also for future years. Because, you know, I just recognize that, I mean, flexibility is a fundamental quality for success.
In Gary's 20-year chess career, success was never in short supply. But nothing lasts forever.
I made a conscious decision that Linares 2005 will be my last professional event. And today I played my last professional game.
Is there a maximum age, or can you be a chess champion if you want to be at 65?
It's a very demanding game, so you have to spend time at the computer, analyzing, preparing new ideas, and then you just play under this heavy pressure. So it sucks a lot of energy out of you. So, and players in their 20s or early 30s, they definitely have a physical advantage over older competitors. I probably would be able to play a few more years, but I made a decision to retire, and it was not just overnight, you know, at the end of the tournament in Spain, in the city of Linares, but just beforehand. I thought I already made enough difference in the game of chess. So just making difference was important, and I just recognized that maybe it's time just to move on. So just to start changing my life before it's too late. So you can't stay in chess indefinitely because everybody needs challenges. So, and I thought about other challenges.
At the head of those challenges, politics. Gary's interest dated back to epoch-making events in 1991, when the communist empire collapsed. The birth of an independent Russia heralded an era of optimism. It was not to last.
In 1991, when we had our own collapse of Berlin Wall, so the collapse of the Soviet regime in Moscow, in the heart of the Soviet state, I don't think anybody could predict the return of the KGB to power less than 10 years from that moment.
For Gary, the key error was Yeltsin's. In 1999, the Russian president appointed his own successor, a young, ambitious, former KGB officer, Vladimir Putin.
Putin, by far, you know, is the richest man on earth, who controls hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars that allocated through this oil and gas export and other, you know, selling other riches of Russia. And he's determined to use every opportunity, every muscle, whether it's military or intelligence or financial, to maintain his power. We are now living in a country that is anything but democracy. It's a one-man rule, and it's very clear that the Putin's rule will not be stopped by the ballot. Most of the opposition leaders now, they are under constant criminal investigation with some ridiculous accusations and criminal cases. And it seems that Putin is determined to end this period of opposition activities by simply throwing everybody behind bars or kicking them out of the country.
For Gary, the archetypal case, Mikhail Khodorkovsky. In 2003, Russia's richest oil baron criticized Putin's administration for its alleged corruption.
Four separate organizations analyze the extent of corruption in Russia. All arrive at the same figure, $30 billion.
The president was not amused. 8 months later, Khodorkovsky was himself arrested and charged with fraud. He was eventually sentenced to 12 years in prison. In response to what they saw as Putin's heavy-handed methods, Russian activists took to the streets to protest. Gary joined them.
This regime is criminal. It's a police state.
They arrest people everywhere because it's scared stiff.
Well, those days of the protest marches and so on, obviously, are still fresh in your memory.
I would call that those days were quite vegetarians compared to what's happening in Russia today. It's 2007, it's almost 6 years ago. And yes, at that time, the government was not very keen to see protests on the street. We marched, you know, in relatively small crowds, like 4,000 or 5,000 people. And you could get beaten, arrested for a few days.
And you got
no, I was detained a number of times, arrested and stayed in prison 5 days in 2007.
What was it like in a Russian prison?
Look, it's not nice. I mean, prison is a prison. So even if you stay there 5 days, it's still highly unpleasant, yeah. But today, it's all changed. Now, it's not just, you know, a few days in prison. Now they are threatening people with, you know, long terms. There are criminal cases. There's actually one huge criminal case is unfolding in Russia now, so-called the riots on May 6th, where every piece of video footage shows you that the police provoked and attacked an unarmed crowd of tens of thousands of people. And eventually, with all the provocations caused by these certain people installed in the crowd, and again, it's all seen, it's all recorded. Now they're trying to accuse opposition of inciting hatred and even an attempt of coup d'etat, so it's just the state treason, and call for mass riots as part of this big trial prepared by Putin's henchmen.
According to his critics, Putin's henchmen are capable of less subtle tactics.
We had one of the worst records in targeting journalists, like Anna Politkovskaya. It's pretty sad record of journalists being killed or badly injured for saying negative things about top government officials.
On the wall of the conference room at the newspaper where Anna worked, a memorial to her and 5 other staff from Novya killed while reporting on crime and corruption in Russia. But the man who was commissioned to look into her assassination for the paper says his investigations took him into the upper reaches of government.
It's obvious that Politkovskaya murder is political. The person behind this murder is not a regular civilian or businessman. This person is placed very high in social and political hierarchy of our country.
A week after Politkovskaya's death, Russian intelligence officer Alexander Litvinenko accused Putin of sanctioning the murder. 2 weeks later, he was assassinated in London. There is no hard proof that the Russian government was complicit in either killing. But speaking out against the administration can be a hazardous business.
Over the years that you've been a leading rebel, have you been conscious of, aware of, being followed, someone attempting to hurt you or kill you?
I was not a target of something that dramatic, but for 8 years I've been, you know, I've been hiring bodyguards while I'm in Russia. You know, I feel very comfortable by being anywhere, but in my country, you know, I feel that there was a need, and there's still a need, to be protected against the unprovoked attacks by unknown hooligans, which cause so much damage for many of prominent Russians who oppose the regime. As for being tagged or followed, it's 24/7. So you live in Russia, you know, they're not even hiding. Many of our telephone conversations have been published. Everybody knows it's released by Russian security. Any given moment you're in Russia, you should understand that, you know, you are under, you know, constant watch of the big brother. So you know, it's like the rules of the game. So you play this game, you know, that's, you know, you can't escape that.
Because here's a former KGB general, Oleg Kalugin, who's alleged to have said about you, I wouldn't be surprised to hear about something terrible happening to him.
Look, you know, it's very hard to be impassioned talking about such predictions, but
yes.
Again, while you are in Putin's Russia, you can expect anything. But in the last year, things changed actually for worse, because they go after you with the whole power of the Russian state. So that's the prosecution, investigators, and they don't care about even excuses now. They find anything that they can invent, and you're already part of the criminal investigation.
Talking of criminal investigations, here is Russian punk band Pussy Riot with their latest single, Mother of God, Drive Putin Away. Harmless fun? Well, Russian prosecutors didn't think so. In 2012, 3 band members of Pussy Riot were arrested and charged with hooliganism. 2 are still serving prison sentences.
Pussy Riot, is that another typical example of the way things are going now?
It's amazing that this relatively minor case actually told more about Putin's Russia to the rest of the world than many more prominent cases by political standards in Russia. I always said that if they danced naked, but singing, God Save Putin, they would be probably awarded. But they were there asking Virgin Mary to drive Putin away. And that's the crime, especially in the church, because Putin sees himself as the, again, quasi-tsar, who also needs this, legitimization by the Orthodox Church.
In August 2012, Gary tried to show his support by attending the band members' court verdict. Results were perhaps predictable. But a week later, he was cleared of all charges and released.
I wouldn't expect you to pay tribute to Putin for anything, but I suppose it would be a case that almost any leader before Putin would have had you in jail continuously.
I would talk about Yeltsin, the leader before Putin.
I was thinking of the whole range.
I would talk about Gorbachev. No, because I lived under conscious life under Gorbachev and Yeltsin, yes. And so naturally the life under Stalin was much worse. But do we compare Putin to Stalin? I mean, how do we start? So this is the...
Yes, this is very good.
It's a typical excuse of the Western leaders saying, no, life today is not as bad as under Stalin or even under Brezhnev. Actually, as for Brezhnev's years and today, I think we are already, at a level where, questions can be asked. Russia today is rapidly moving into the some sort of the quasi-dictatorship. I say quasi-dictatorship because dictatorships are always based on this mass repression. But modern dictators, they are different. So they just, they even allow some sort of elections. The question is what they do when their power is threatened. And unfortunately, I have no doubt, when Putin, feels that he is threatened, he'll act like Gaddafi or Bashar al-Assad, not even like Mubarak.
It would seem that you think the situation, the conditions in Russia are getting worse for various reasons, that there's a weakness in the resistance and there's a strength in the governmental response. Should we be as pessimistic as that, or can you be optimistic?
I think Russian people are quite angry now. You could see a lot of anger, even in the small towns and the countryside, against the officials. But this anger and this growing feeling of desperation is still countered by the genetic fear of change. I think Putin is doomed. I think he will not survive to the end of his term.
His current term.
His current term in 2018. But my greatest concern is that this demise, the demise of the regime, as in 1991, may lead to the collapse of the country.
When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, its artificially created borders became porous. They fragmented. The result in a number of former republics was war. Many of these conflicts, such as the one in Chechnya, linger on to this day.
The difference is that in 1991 there were still certain foundations to preserve the country. Yeltsin was legitimate, he was legitimately elected. Then there were recognized borders, most of them were recognized. Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, but still there were some small enclaves that were in question. Every time you had an enclave in question, there was a bloodshed. Now, Russia, unlike ex-Soviet Union, doesn't have the recognized borders. So that's why you don't know where Chechnya ends. And what will happen, you know, with the North Caucasus or with the Far East that is being quite openly challenged or claimed by Chinese. So I have a great concern about the future of Russia as a state, because the regime lost any contact with the population, and it still survives because of the enormous amount of money allocated through the high energy prices and of its manipulating propaganda that incited the worst hatred between different groups of Russian society.
Throughout his career, Gary has made a point of taking on bigger, stronger adversaries. World champions, chess's organizing federation, supercomputers. Now, at last, he may have finally met his match.
Unlike chess, I never consider this as part of winning or losing. This is not a game. I have to do it because I have to do it, but it's more like, you know, sending a message to others. Look, you know, it's just, I also take the risk, and, you know, it's a duty of every conscious citizen to protect civil liberties.
With the triumphant record you possess, when you look back, what do you see as a mistake?
I made tons of mistakes in my life. You know, if I look backward, I'm sure, you know, I can point out at certain moments in my life, saying I would do this different and this different. But at the end of the day, you know, I always follow the same algorithm, trying to make the difference, whether it's at the chessboard or in the surroundings of the chessboard or in my, you know, ordinary life.
Gary, thank you very much for the whole of this conversation. We really appreciate it.
2 months after this interview, Gary Kasparov announced that he will not be returning to Russia for reasons of personal safety.